Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another post-game reaction. Lakers lost 111-103 to drop to 0-2 in the preseason. Lost to the Warriors. I'm still in preseason form here. They played without Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Austin Reaves, Marcus Smart, Adu Thiero, and Maxi Kleber. It's almost easier to say the players that did play rather than the players that didn't. So that's their three best players, the three starting locks, and four of their top six players. So certainly depleted on both sides of the ball to an extent, but still a disappointing performance, particularly in the third quarter when they were run off the floor for the second consecutive game, let go of the rope, and gave up 40 points to the Warriors. The Warriors had 24 points like 5 minutes into the third, and just an inexcusable defensive effort and execution and just communication from LA through these first couple of preseason games. But we have a lot to touch on. I'm going to try to get through the game really quickly just because I don't anticipate covering many games like this in the regular season. If there's no Luka, LeBron, Austin, and Marcus, the Lakers are going to be in trouble. They're going to be a lottery team. So, I don't know how much we could take away other than some individual performances, good and bad. And then again, I think the collective defense just has to be better for this group. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Let's get those subscribes up on the road to 50,000 subscribers before the end of the year. And let's get those likes up. Also, for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to Just Picks 44, Zubcut, Peter, Adam, Michael, Connor, Large Laker Fan, Not Around, Sarah, Mac, By the Dip, Hugo, Titus Turner, J-Note, Lakers Visuals, THC, to BTC, I like that, Bugzilla, Jeremy, Izzy, Glenn. I think I got everybody so far that's commented. Lego, Carl. What's up, everybody? White Falcon. So let's get into the overarching thought of this game. And to me, this is going to bleed into one of my takeaways. But again, context here is important. And I'm going to use the same context that I said for the last preseason game. Like, it's the preseason. You don't want to overreact. The Lakers are without at least three starters, if not four of their top six players. Their three best players. They were playing a Golden State team that played their starters and regular rotation for most of the first half, and then benched their starters in the third quarter, or most of their starters, and then they went off and ran LA off the floor. So I want to apply those appropriate caveats before we dissect the game. At the same time, I do want to say, I think that my biggest takeaway so far has been how concerning the Lakers' defensive floor is right now. And again, I think they've only had 3 practices. There's a level of JJ is also changing the scheme. They're playing more drop coverage. So again, I want to be realistic with where the Lakers should be at. But as I said after the Suns game, I feel like they are behind schedule at this point in the season. And the Warriors, mind you, like JJ, one thing I didn't like that JJ said after the Suns game was that he said the Suns had all 19 of their guys in the gym for almost a month and that they were way ahead of the Lakers. And like, that just came off as an excuse to me. And anytime you preface something with it's not an excuse, and then you go on to say something like that, it is an excuse. And that's unlike JJ, and he typically doesn't do stuff like that. And I just felt like that was an excuse for Phoenix just kicking the Lakers' ass on both sides of the ball and out executing them on both sides of the ball. And even if they do have that advantage in terms of time together, they have a brand new rookie head coach. They do have a relatively new rotation in group. It rang hollow to me in terms of a legitimate reason for why the Lakers look the way that they did. Because again, you can still execute at a high level And if you just don't have the talent because you don't have Luka, you don't have LeBron tonight, you don't also have Austin, that's one thing. But the Lakers have not been executing, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. And then with the Warriors, you can't use that excuse. Like, yes, they have a certain built-in continuity, and Steph and Draymond and Steve Kerr have been together for over a decade. But this was a group that they had 7 players on their roster like a week ago, and then they had these flurry of moves after the Kuminga situation. So if any team has an excuse to get off to a slow start in the preseason, it's the Warriors because of the turmoil that they've been enduring all offseason. So I didn't get to check out JJ's comments yet because I was posting some social stuff, my 3 takeaways on TikTok and YouTube and whatnot. But that to me was like, okay, you know, we this one, it's not going to ring true against the Warriors because they're a group that literally just got together a few days ago, right at the start of camp. In terms of, like, I don't know what Al Horford and Gary Payton and all these guys were able to do over the last few weeks because they technically were not Warriors players. So I don't think they were technically allowed to work out at the facility. So I say all that to say the Lakers' execution defensively has been abysmal so far. They gave up 32 plus points in the first 3 quarters, which were the competitive parts of this game. This extends from the Phoenix game. And yes, there's an element of if you have your best players, you're going to score more. It's going to allow you to set your defense. And sometimes the best defense is a really good or even great offense. And I get that, but the Lakers are miscommunicating left and right. They are adopting this drop coverage, but guys are dying on screens. I think the on-ball defense around screens has been poor. I think the up to touch level from the bigs has also been poor, especially against Steph Curry. I thought there were several possessions where DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes were sitting too low. And it's like, there's one player that you have to extend that up to touch even higher against in the league. It's Steph Curry. He walks into 30 footers with his eyes closed, and there just was a lack of urgency on that end from the Lakers. Then that's to say nothing of the transition defense where I rewatched the game this morning, the Suns game, and there was one possession where the Lakers had 4 guys back. There was a ball handle, I think it was Gillespie, and Devin Booker just cuts through 3 defenders, catches the ball, and lays the ball in. And it's like, you just got scored on 2-on-4. Like, how is that happening in a competitive basketball game? So there were plays like that tonight where just Golden State's passing around the Lakers, or they're getting offensive rebounds, or they just get the Lakers in the blender. And once LA's in rotation, they are not quick enough and athletic enough to make up that ground. So this is a bit of a rambling opening because I don't want to, again, take away too much from this, but just looking at some of the limitations with LA, I think they can execute better and they can communicate better, but there are some limitations here just with how quick these guys are, how long these guys are, and just the collective basketball IQ with some of these player combinations that they're putting out there. So I'm a little worried, to be completely honest, with the defense. And I think it'll be better. Like, Gabe was out there and that helped a little bit, I think, with the starting group. But I am a bit worried at what this is going to look like longer term, because I think even with Vando defending his ass off at the point of attack, I thought DeAndre Ayton and Jackson Hayes have both played pretty well in terms of rim protection the first couple games. The screening, communication, and just there's been simple stuff that they're just getting torched on. And I don't Golden State is its own beast because of their offense, but Phoenix was, I think, not even going to be a play-in team. And the way that they just dominated the Lakers defense was a bit concerning. So that's my overarching thoughts is I think the Lakers defense is a mess right now. And I think they need to spend the next week really ironing out some of these details. And we heard about the spirited start to training camp. It is not quite translated through the first couple games. And again, with the caveats of who's out, I still think there needs to be a higher level of urgency overall from this group to just get off to a good start. And they had that at times in the first half, to be clear. And I thought it was impressive that they were within 7, but I still felt like a lot of that was some shot making from Gabe and them able to turn the Warriors over a bit, get out in transition, get to the free throw line. But the half court defense and at times the transition defense have been really, really bad to start the preseason. notable performers, we got to start with Jared Vanderbilt, who had 9 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. He's going to be one of my takeaways, so I'm not going to spoil my thoughts on Vando. Jake LaRavia had 10 points and 3 assists. DeAndre Ayton got going early, 7 points, 7 rebounds, 2 blocks. Gabe Vincent, 16 points, 5 assists, made his preseason debut. He was hitting everything. He was looking like Steph out there for a little bit. He was going shot for shot with Steph on some off-ball movement stuff and coming off handoffs and screens, and what was making some, look like Miami Gabe. Quiet game from Rui offensively. I think he's been the guy arguably the most who has suffered from not having Luka and LeBron and Austin. Rui is clearly more of a finisher than a creator in terms of his own offense, so he needs guys to set him up, and the Lakers offense has just not had the level of ball handling and playmaking to set up a guy like Rui consistently. Off the bench, Dalton Connect bounced back with 12 points, had 10 through the first 3 quarters, so that's really the part I want to focus on more. 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Still think the defense is problematic with Dalton, and just like he had a play with Steph where Steph gives the ball up, just a simple give and go, and just cuts right past Dalton. And it's like, you got to know your personnel. You got to know who you're guarding. And he should not be guarding Steph, right? It was a cross match in transition, but just the simple give it away and then cut right in front of Dalton and get a layup. Like, that's just too many mistakes from him on that end to the point where I think at this point, he's just not looking like a rotation player as currently constructed. But I will say a better effort offensively, better results offensively. RJ Davis, 11 points again. Bronny had 5 points, 2 of 6 shooting. Nick Smith, I thought, was better in his second game as a Laker, 9 points. Jackson Hayes, 8 points, 6 rebounds. Christian Coloco, 4 points. And those are the primary guys to touch on. Stat of the night for me, I mean, 40-25 in the third quarter. The Lakers once again got blitzed in the third. They just let go of the rope coming out of halftime for whatever reason. I thought, if anything, this should have been an opportunity to jump on the Warriors and run them off the floor. And all of a sudden, Steph's out, Jimmy's out, Draymond's out. Okay, like, let's show what we can do against this team. And they did make the impressive comeback in the fourth quarter, but they didn't win the game. And ultimately, it was just third string versus third string, and they were able to beat the Warriors and the bench guys. But I think this overall, the third quarter, and for whatever, and this was an issue last season. Remember, the Lakers had several games and struggle at times in the third quarter where they would just come out after halftime and really just not be up to par for whatever reason. Takeaway number 1, got to start with Jared Vanderbilt. He is looking like the pre-injury version of himself. All the hype that he's gotten through training camp has materialized here, I think, through the first couple of games. I'm going to pour some cold water on the shooting. He is 1 for 5 on threes over the first, 1 for 6 on threes over the first 2 games. So the shooting, I don't think, is quite, like, I was skeptical of some of the stuff that Jake LaRavia and JJ Redick were saying to begin with, but now that we've seen it in practice, like in game practice, it's like better that he's shooting with confidence, but there's still that little hitch in his shot. I think it's been inconsistent in terms of it's sometimes looks smoother, sometimes had the hitch, but regardless of that, he was so impactful on both sides of the ball tonight. He was picking up Steph full court. He was playing passing lanes. He was being disruptive several times, diving on the ball for loose balls, deflecting the ball out of bounds, just being a pest. The second straight game, he forced teams to give the ball up to someone else because of just how he was pressuring. I thought offensively, did hit a 3, had a putback, had a nice cut for an and one. And also, I thought the playmaking really stood out with the 4 assists. Like, that's been something that Vando has, that point forward ability. That does come with some limitations. He did have 3 turnovers, and you want to be careful. Like, there could be some good and the bad when he has the ball, right? And he's just as liable to dribble the ball off of his foot or into a crowd and get it poked away as he is to hit a roll man or hit a cutter or something. But I thought there was some really nice playmaking plays from Vando tonight. And if he continues to play like this, if he continues to look like this, he's really going to make JJ Redick's job difficult in terms of assessing the rotation and just breaking it down. I don't think he's shown enough to me personally To start, I still would put the starting battle between Marcus Smart and Rui Hachimura, but he is making a strong case to be the seventh man and push Jake LaRavia for that seventh man role. And at a minimum, if he's like the eighth man nominally, I still think that eighth man, he's now pushing, like knocking on that 20 minutes a night plus consistently. So I think he's so far been the biggest riser for me through the first couple of games in terms of his potential role come the start of the regular season. I want to see ultimately like what this looks like with the full team, because I think Rui's going to look much better when Luka, LeBron, and Austin are all out there together. I think Marcus Smart is going to look better in the Lakers defensive scheme versus just him switching as much as they were switching previously. So I think it's still, to me, more Vando as like the seventh or eighth guy, but he can make that a real competition. And again, could just be like a top eight that's playing a lot. And that's before we even mentioned Gabe Vincent, who looked really good tonight as well. Takeaway number two, just the continuation of the Lakers defense. I mean, I touched on it with the overarching thoughts, but I think like there's been stretches where it's been good with the ball pressure. There've been stretches where it's been good with the rim protection, but I think like DeAndre Ayton, we've seen some of his limitations playing in space. I think this is a particularly tough matchup for him where he has to get out to stretch bigs like Draymond Green, Al Horford, Quentin Post. I don't think this is a great matchup for him on the defensive end. There's some times he was cross-matched with Jimmy Butler, Moses Moody. They're able to take him off the dribble or create some separation. I think Rui has had, like, he had the activity and he also had a steal tonight again. But his off ball, like he's been helping off of shooters a little bit too much and getting a little too lost off the ball. And I have not liked his on-ball reps, more so in the Phoenix game against Devin Booker. But really, I think with the way the Lakers are trying to defend, I think you have a really tough time justifying starting Rui if he's going to be like your point of attack or wing guy and he's going to be trying to navigate screens on the ball. I don't think that's a smart defensive approach. Otherwise, like defensively, like Jackson, I think is like solid in the verticality and rim protection have been there, but not many other thoughts. Like the deep bench guys have been a little rough. I will say that. And I thought it was smart that JJ went away from the Nick Smith, Bronny James, Dalton Connect trio together through the first three quarters. And then final takeaway before we get into the Q&A portion, offensive rebounding has become a strength for the Lakers through the first couple of games. And I'm not quite sure how much this is going to apply once they have the full roster, because obviously they're missing several key perimeter guys. They are going to play a bit smaller in general. Like, right, I mean, this starting lineup was giant. You had Ayton, Vanderbilt, Rui, LaRavia, Vincent. With the exception of Vincent, you had four guys 6'7" and above, all guys capable of grabbing offensive rebounds, you know, more so specifically Ayton, LaRavia, and Vando. But the Lakers have had double-digit offensive rebounds in both of their games, and this comes after ranking 20th in offensive rebound percentage after the Luka trade. So it was not a strength of last season's team. Overall for the season, they ranked 23rd. So even with AD, they were actually even worse. So this is a point of emphasis for JJ in camp. And it's been one of the few that has actually translated well over the first couple games. Again, you add in Austin and Luka and LeBron for more minutes. Marcus Smart, I think, can be a sneaky offensive rebound guy, but it's not really like a strength of his. I do wonder if the offensive rebounds come down a little bit, but so far that's been an extra, like a big thing for the Lakers last year was not winning the margins, and JJ and LeBron and AD and Austin at various points in the season talking about needing to win the margins, and LA just with turnovers and free throws was like one way they would win the margins, but turnovers, offensive rebounds, just the extra possessions, they weren't always good or even average at some of those things. And right now, there are offensive rebounding. And part of it's matchup based. Phoenix and Golden State are two of the smaller teams overall. Outside of playing a center, the rest of their guys tend to be on the smaller side. So Golden State started a really small starting group, and I thought LA did a really good job of attacking them in the paint and attacking them on the offensive glass. But that's just been a little trend to watch, is like how can they translate this into the regular season, if at all, when they have slightly different personnel. Yeah, I mean, have some notes from last game, but honestly, I don't think we need to get into that. That might be something for my episode of Buha's Block tomorrow. But let's just get into the Q&A here. First one from Mac Roblox 94. Thank you for the super chat. I think Vanderbilt and Jake LaRavia improved in this game. Ayton has more to work on. They have a lot of work to do on defense and communication. Agreed in all regards. I thought Vando I thought was better on both ends. Like I will hit on one thing or I'll hit on a couple things. And this is to your point of Vando and LaRavia both improving. One, I went back and rewatched the game, like I said this morning. And one thing that stood out to me was Vando was much more effective against Gillespie and Grayson Allen than he was compared to Devin Booker. So there was part of me like going into this game that was like, I want to pump the brakes a little bit on like, yes, if Jared Vanderbilt's just playing bench minutes and he's just matched up against like Gillespie is I think like a fringe backup-ish player. Grayson Allen obviously is a key rotation guy for Phoenix, but those are not like primary ball hand. Like when the Suns are really running their offense, it's going to be a lot of Devin Booker and Jalen Green running the show, less so Allen and Gillespie. So to me, it was more like Vando was picking up secondary ball handler level guys and disrupting them. And he did have some nice possessions against Booker, but he also had some possessions where Booker blew by him. Booker scored on him. He had that hook shot on him. So it was a little bit more of a mixed bag with Booker, where I thought he looked dominant against Allen and Gillespie, two guys he has a size advantage, a length advantage, and an athleticism advantage over. So I thought tonight, doing this against Steph, doing it against some of their other perimeter guys, like this was a tougher test for Vando overall, in a team that tests you with their movement, their cutting, their screening. And I thought he passed this test much better. I still think the point of attack screen navigation has been a bit of an issue for him. There are several times, and look, Draymond sets some illegal screens, so you know part of it is just playing the Warriors, but he continues to die, I think, on too many screens right now. Like that's one of my only issues. I also think sometimes the gambling, when he doesn't get it, he's out of the play, and that can be a bit of an issue with Vando. LaRavia, I actually thought, rewatching the game, his defense was worse than I remembered against Phoenix. I thought it was better tonight, and then he did get going, especially in that third quarter, getting to the rim, getting into his midi, getting to the floater. Like he looked more comfortable offensively. Ayton, I've liked what I've seen with the rim protection. I've liked what I've seen in transition at times defensively. Like he missed the lob against the Suns, gets back, breaks up their lob attempt. Tonight, I mean, there are some times where like Ayton will roll, he'll want the ball, he won't get it, then he'll kind of, I don't want to say sulk, but sort of slowly trot back and not really run back with the same level of energy he has maybe after a basket. And that's been one of the knocks on him throughout his career. So I think that's an area he needs to improve on, is like, even if you don't get the ball, you need to bust your ass back and get to the paint, go protect the rim. As I said earlier, I think there are some times where the stretch big nature of the Suns, the Warriors, was able to kind of stretch him a little thin. And I think he has some limitations there against quicker guys attacking him off the dribble. And yeah, the defense has been bad. Let's just call it what it is. The defense has been very bad through the first couple games. Ooh, to the Wee, thank you for the super chat. I don't know if the ROI on Rui is worth it. He requires so much help from others to open his own offense and still can't defend very well. We should shop him. I mean, I would say, to me, through the first couple games, and it's tough because there's been no Luka, there's been no LeBron, there's been no Austin for one of them. I think Rui would look much better in a more competent and just better continuity and just the more normal offensive structure for the Lakers. However, I don't disagree with you in like a macro sense. I think in most scenarios, Rui is a sixth man or even seventh man for like most good teams in the league right now. I think there are some scenarios in which he makes sense as the third starter, particularly if you have an elite wing defender and an elite center defensively. Like I've mentioned, I think you replace Randall with Rui, I think he could start next to a McDaniels and a Gobert. You replace Chet or Hartenstein with Rui, he could start next to a J-Dub, and then either a Chet or a Hartenstein in like that type of front court. But there are very few teams that have both an elite center and an elite wing at like that level defensively. So I do think Rui, when not starting next to those types of players, which he won't be with the Lakers if he starts, I think he makes more sense off the bench. And I like when we talk about some of the Luka led lineups, if it is like Luka, Jackson, Rui as like the base of a bench lineup, I like that where you run Luka, Jackson pick and rolls. You have Rui as a spot up guy, but also a guy who could punish mismatches, and you could run some sets and some actions to get him going. But I'm with you. Like, I think that's why I've been pro Wiggins trade all summer. And ideally you get to keep Rui and just move him to the bench and don't have to give him up. But if they do have to give him up, I would be open to trading him for Wiggins. Like, I mean, to be completely honest, I think Laravia and Vanderbilt have outplayed him through the first couple games. It's small sample size, and he is somewhat dependent on the other guys to create for him. So I want to see Rui at full strength, like what that looks like. But I do not think he's been their best forward through the first couple games. And on paper, he should be, but that has just not been the case. Broke with no money. Thank you for the super chat. Where's Chris Magnon been? I'm not sure. I saw him. He was in street clothes in the first game. I didn't see him on the bench this game. Doesn't mean he wasn't on the bench, but I was not there. I've not been at either game, as you guys can tell by my background. So that is something hopefully JJ can fill us in on at practice. Rich, Jovan, two preseason games, reading too much into it. Thank you for the super chat. Yes and no. I would say that, I think there's a path to honestly making a case that the Lakers defense should be better right now. That if you look at how bad they've defended with LeBron, Luka, and Austin on the floor together, I've talked about this before, but those three on the floor together, including the regular season and playoffs, league's best offense with those three on the floor, league's worst defense with those three on the floor together. So I think you could actually make a case that, like, Austin, depending on the matchup, and certainly Luka as an on-ball guy, and then LeBron, depending on the night, like, those can be some of the Lakers' weaker rotation defenders. And the fact that they have not had those guys and have defended this poorly, that is concerning to me. I'm not writing, like, I'm not moving the Lakers up or down in my preseason standings or my playoff predictions or anything. So I'm not trying to, like, it's not like a referendum on the whole season. I'm just stating right now, entering the season, my biggest concern with the Lakers was their defense. I said they projected to be around league average or slightly below league average on the defensive end. And they've looked like a team that's probably going to be below average on the defensive end. So I would like to see what it looks like at full strength. And I leave some room for improvement over the next week. They have a week to practice and look at film and get better on this. But I also think some of it's just like a foot speed athleticism issue where they're just getting beat off the dribble by quicker guys. And there's only so much you can do with that, especially when you're changing your base defense to a more of a drop coverage, less switching. So, and for the record, I'm pro that. I like the move. That takes time to adjust to. So maybe part of it is that. But I also just think there's some limitations for this group defensively, and I think they're being exposed right now. Sarah, thank you for the super chat. Also, thank you for being a member. Have you watched any other preseason games? Early thoughts on Western teams? I have not. I've kept up a little bit with them, but I am planning on watching some film on some teams because also, as many of you probably are aware of, I'm going to be launching a national show at some point here in the preseason leading into the regular season. So need to obviously know what's going on with some of the other teams in the league, but I saw OKC won by 20 against Charlotte. No surprise there, but I will report back with some updates on the other teams. Danica, thank you for the super chat. How much of these games is on JJ versus team effort / chemistry? How impactful do you think is the confidence that Luka brings to the team when he's playing? So the last part, I think that's a huge factor. And again, if Luka's dropping 15 in the first quarter in some of these games, the Lakers are just going to be like, Lakers might just be able to outscore a lot of teams. And I think to look at the last couple of matchups with the way that Phoenix played in the first half and the way that Golden State played in the first half, I do think at full strength, the Lakers are probably winning those games. Like, to be clear, I'm like, if the whole theme of training camp in this season has been banner number 18, championship shape, championship habits, championship communication. So if that's the standard for this group, that is the standard that I'm going to grade them on and look at them on both sides of the ball through that lens. And with that perspective, I do not think they've been anywhere close to that right now. And of course, it's early and they have plenty of time to build to that. But I'm also like a little disappointed with how far behind schedule they seem on that end. Now, to who I put that more on, probably a little bit more in the coaching staff at this point. But I do think like the guys have just kind of, for whatever reason, let go of the rope in the third quarter. And I don't put that on the coaching staff per se. Like you can maybe put a little bit, like, I don't know what JJ's telling them at halftime, right? But it should be on the players to come out with a sense of urgency. And I think that like lack of urgency at times, like there've been guys who've played like that. Like I think Vando and Gabe, Ayton at times, Laravia at times, Rui at times, like there have been guys who have come in and had a sense of urgency, but collectively, I think it's been more so like flashes of individual brilliance rather than the collective brilliance. And it will be like Vando will be pressuring the ball 94 feet. Then they'll finally get the ball past him. And then someone just gets like beat on a back cut. And it's like, well, Vando did his job. Then, player X didn't do his job. And it's just been too many breakdowns like that. So I think it's too early to do the blame pie, but I think right now everybody gets a slice. White Falcon, they look like they're not communicating on the court, TBH. Yeah, I think that's been a big thing. I think there's been several out of balance possessions that have been really bad where it'll just be like a simple split cut and the Lakers botch the switch and one person thinks they're switching, one person thinks they're staying with their man. Then there's that moment of hesitation. Like they've given up several back cuts on out of bounds plays just off of that action. And that is something that, again, because the other part of this is like the Lakers, Luka obviously was at Eurobasket. LeBron had his tour in Asia, but a lot of these other guys have been in the gym for multiple weeks. And while they weren't allowed to like officially practice or get like input from the coaching staff, they are able to scrimmage together. They are able to go through individual drills and workouts together and stuff. So I also don't fully buy that like this team is that far behind from a continuity perspective in terms of reps on the floor. Like, yes, maybe as a collective, but they have been in the gym for basically, all or most of September together. Again, not with everybody because Luka and LeBron, but those guys have also not been there. So in theory, like this group should have clicked a little bit more. So I do think they're behind the eight ball in terms of the communication and the execution. It's very early, so I want to reserve like long-term judgment. And notice that like I'm not concerned about the offensive end. The offensive end, I think they're going to be fine. I think you get Luka back, you get LeBron back, you get Austin back. I'm not concerned with the offense. I think the offense is going to be really good, and I've actually liked a lot of the things that JJ has been doing, more stack actions, more just three-man actions overall, really involving DeAndre Ayton. He's had a lot of lob opportunities that he struggled to finish, but still the opportunities are there. So I've actually liked the offensive end. I'm actually probably more bullish on the offensive end than I was entering the preseason, but the defensive end is to me like ultimately going to be where this team's ceiling is because I think they're going to be really good on offense, but whether they're like the 11th best defense or the 19th best defense to me is going to determine what seed are they, how many games do they win, what's their playoff viability. And that right now is still TBD. Michael, please discuss Bronny's performance. I like his energy and athleticism and maybe the shooting will come, but I'm concerned the defensive mistakes reflect a misguided focus on his offensive game. I think you put it really well. I will say that it felt like there were stretches of both games where he was targeted more so defensively, but even against Golden State, they had the trap there with, I believe it was Draymond and Pods where they just tied him up, and might have been Kuminga and Pods. I think it was Pods and either Kuminga or Draymond, but they just trapped Bronny at half court. And like one thing that he clearly struggles with is he is not good against ball pressure, and he will pick up his dribble sometimes prematurely and just try to get off the ball. So like that's good self-awareness on his part, but it is a real limitation that I think at this point, seeing him against Phoenix and Golden State in the competitive portions, I think he's still far away from being a rotation player. Like that's been my biggest takeaway with him so far is there's been very nice flashes in real progress in the G League, There were some real flashes toward the end of last season, though that typically was in garbage time. And there's some real flashes in summer league, but he, I think, is still a ways away from putting that together against real NBA competition in like a rotation sense. I thought the defense in particular against the Suns was really bad. He was beaten both on the ball and off the ball, but it would be like simple cuts and or a simple screen, and he just wouldn't see it. And so, like, I think his off-ball awareness really needs to improve. But then even on the ball, he's someone who's also died around screens. And just to be clear, that's a term when you get hit by a screen and you don't do a good job of getting around it. Just for it's basketball terminology. But I know it kind of sounds weird. But just dying on screens and not kind of being the point of attack guy that they need him to be. I mean, when it was him, Dalton, and Nick Smith, I was like, I'm surprised JJ hasn't pulled his hair out during like especially the Phoenix game. That trio was so bad defensively that they single-handedly in both the first and second allowed Phoenix to go on these big runs where I think it kind of, it impacted the rest of the game. But he still has ways to go defensively. Offensively, I thought tonight was better than the Phoenix game. I thought the Phoenix game, he'll sometimes do this thing where he sort of predetermines that he's going to just take a shot. He's like, it's been too long. I need to get going. And I respect the confidence. I respect the intent. But there are times he will just force things offensively. And I think that's something that he needs to do a better, because you will see, like, I think he has good passing instincts. He has good overall awareness and basketball IQ. And I think he often is trying to do the right thing. I just think sometimes there are times he just is still learning, I think, where to be and how to play defense at the NBA level. And then offensively, the ball pressure, and I think sometimes looking for his own shot at the expense of the overall offense has been something that he has struggled with at times. So I'm with you though. I like the energy, the athleticism, the basketball IQ, the intent. I think it's all there, but I still think he needs a lot more reps and a lot of film work, to be honest, to sharpen up on both sides of the ball. Mr. TD says die equals not fighting through the screen. Exactly. Mr. Messenger, thank you for the super chat. These games show weak depth at spots 9 to 14. Yeah, I will say I think at full strength, I like the Lakers top 10. I think if we're going with the projected starting group, which has Rui in it, let's just say that's the starters for now. Then you have Smart, Vando, Laravia, Gabe, and Jackson. Now, I haven't given it enough love to Gabe. I thought Gabe was awesome tonight. Like he had a little bit of a rough start with the turnovers and some deflected passes. And like, I still think that his lack of size is ultimately his biggest limiting factor, aside from like the cold streaks he'll go on. But Gabe hit some really big shots and really kept them in the game. And then I also thought did a really good job, had several pocket passes to Ayton, had a couple of lobs to Ayton that Ayton just didn't finish. So Gabe could have had even more assists. I thought Gabe was really solid. He's not going to play like this every night, as we know from watching him, but I think you could talk me into the top 10. Like, I will say that my biggest takeaway from rewatching the first game was how much better Jackson was on the second rewatch than it live. And look, the like him picking up illegal screens and him just lunging and fouling guys on drives, like it does get old. And it can be frustrating to watch because it's the same mistakes over and over again with him. But I thought overall his verticality, he had a couple blocks, just did a really good job of absorbing contact. This is the Phoenix game. And then offensively rolling and had the play of the game with the dunk on Booker. Also caught another body on Trace Jackson Davis tonight. And I think Jackson in a limited backup role, I think is fine. Like I think he's fine to solid in that role. So I'm actually okay with the top 10. Spots 11 to 14. Maxi's a complete wild card. We just don't know what we're going to get at this stage of his career. Early 30s, coming off of a major injury. Now he's dealing with something else again. I do not think Dalton is anywhere close to rotation level with his defense right now. And I just don't I think has really regressed over the last, dating back to like the last third of last season into summer league into now. I just think has really regressed on the defensive end, where he was never a good defender, but it somehow has gotten even worse. Bronny, as I said, I don't think is ready. And then I'm forgetting Adu has had knee surgery back in March and has been in and out in terms of availability. So I don't know what we can really expect from him. JJ said it's a development year. So I'm with you. Spots 11 to 14, I have some real concerns, and we're starting to get some more clarity with who belongs and who doesn't. But I'm okay. Not sure. 8 through 10 in the rotation is probably going to be a little shaky depending on the matchup, depending on the night. But I think they're in a better spot than they were last year at this point. Rich, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate you. Dylan DeVille and Brooks, hey, Jovan, do you think LeBron, Luka, and Reaves will play this preseason together? I would assume they play once together. JJ said they want to get a couple of dress rehearsals in, but he also said that he's not sure if LeBron is going to be a part of the dress rehearsal. So it sounds like the dress rehearsal would just be everybody but LeBron, potentially. Adu is supposed to return this upcoming week. Maxey was only supposed to be out a few days, so he's also supposed to return this week. Marcus Smart is supposed to return this week. Austin and Luka were just resting. They were not injury related. LeBron is dealing with the nerve in his glute. And I can't say that injury without laughing. It's just a funny one. So, I mean, if you made me guess, I would guess LeBron probably plays in one preseason game. I think it's going to be, unless this is really serious, like I just don't see him sitting out the entire preseason. But, maybe he plays one game and he plays like 12 minutes or something in the first half. I could see that maybe. But as like I'm basing things off of the current information in what is available, it sounds like this is being led primarily by LeBron's camp, and that's the way JJ has framed it, as like he's being told when LeBron is going to play and how much, and based on the conversations between LeBron and Mike Mancias and the Lakers performance staff and just those, however they divvy that up. So I think Luka and Austin will at least play together for a couple games. Whether LeBron will be part of that, I don't have great clarity on that, but I would assume he probably plays in like at least one. Brian Farmer, thank you for the question here. Hey, Jovan, do you think JJ is going to handle the substitutions, and how do you think JJ is going to handle the substitutions in the first quarters of games? Will he lean on Luka facilitating early with LeBron off the floor? So based on last year, the way I think this is going to go is it's probably going to be similar to the LeBron AD dynamic in the past and the way that LeBron and Luka were for last season, where LeBron likes to come out around the 7 or 6 minute mark and then re-enter the game with about 2 minutes or so left in the first. And then Luka is probably going to play a majority, like if not the entire first quarter, majority of the first quarter. Maybe he comes out with 2 or 3 minutes left. And then you have a stretch there with Austin. I wouldn't be surprised if Austin extends past LeBron, maybe takes like a quick breather, comes back in for that portion where maybe Luka and LeBron are off. He plays like a minute by himself with whoever else is out there. Then they close with Austin and LeBron leading into the second quarter. I think with everything we know about Luka, he likes to go off in the first. That's been his highest scoring quarter for most seasons in his career and was his highest scoring quarter as a Laker. So I expect him to be like a 10 to 15 point. 15's a little high, but like probably in like the 8 to 12 points per game in the first quarter. And he likes to just set a tone with the scoring, and then that leads to defenses playing him in a different way, and then that opens up his passing. So I actually expect Luka, in terms of like facilitating, I think it's probably going to be more Austin as the facilitator. And he, I think sometimes is a little bit more passive, and then will pick his spots a little bit later in the game. But I think Luka is going to be more aggressive, setting a tone, and it'll be Austin and LeBron kind of being more of the facilitators. And then as Luka becomes more the facilitator, those guys become more aggressive, if that makes sense. So I think it's going to be a continuation of how they played last season for the most part. Axel, hello, Jovan. Do you think we're a play-in team with a sad emoji about to cry? No, I don't think the Lakers are a play-in team. I think there's a lot of work to be done defensively. And again, I think the floor defensively is probably a little bit lower than I initially thought, but we're not, we're a third of the way through the preseason. So we haven't seen these guys at full strength yet. I'd like to see that first before I make any grand declaration. So I believe I had the Lakers as the 4 seed, entering the season, and I'm maintaining that. Connor Phillips, thank you for the super chat. Thank you for also being a member. I'm already worried about the third quarter woes carrying over. Yeah, I want to see what JJ said about this. I would love to know, because it's been a thing for this. It's been a thing, honestly, preceding JJ. This was a thing under Darvin at times. I don't know what it is that they come out with these lackadaisical third quarter stretches that are concerning, to say the least. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer. Like, I don't know if they're just getting, I really don't know, because in theory, like, you're supposed to stay warm when you're on the bench or you're not in the game. And I would assume that they are doing everything they can to keep these guys warm and active, just like every other team. So I don't know if it's a mentality thing, just letting their foot off the gas. It felt like they gave a really spirited effort in the first half tonight. And then they kind of like let go. I said let go of the rope, but took their foot off the gas. Whatever cliche you want to use, like they just were almost like, okay, we did our job. We hung with the Warriors starters without our starters, and now we can just kind of chill. And that's not the approach. Like, I just want to see a little bit more competitiveness from this group. That's really what I'm saying. And I think the group that's been out there, in theory, it should be more of a skill and talent thing rather than like competitiveness. And the competitive fire should be there, but it's been the skill and talent and the competitiveness also not being there. And that's where I've been a little bit concerned, because you can't really coach that. You can't coach competitiveness. You either have it or you don't. White Falcon, if the Lakers can be a top 10 defensive team or a top 3 seed easy, yes, I'm just highly skeptical that they can be a top 10 defensive team. For perspective, as I've said before, they had the stretch last year, 24 games, best defense in the league. The stretch preceding that, they were a bottom 10 defense. The stretch after that, they were a bottom 10 defense. So for basically 2/3 of last season, they were a bottom 10 defense. And then they had this one stretch that stood out where they were the best defense. But then it returned, like, again, in the playoffs, not a good defense. So, and I think, remember last year for over half the season, they had Anthony Davis and Max Christie. Right now, like, DeAndre Ayton has had some impressive rim protection, but he is nowhere near the versatile or mobile defender that AD is, and just overall impact. Like, AD's multiple tiers above. And Vando and Max are just different types of defenders. But, Vando, I think, a healthy Vando and Smart can change the perimeter defense for this group, but I still have some concerns overall. Axel, Warriors look scary. Do you think they're a threat to the Lakers? Yeah. They were 22-5 with Jimmy, Steph, and Draymond together last season. That's, I think, high 50s or around 60-ish win pace. So that, I mean, they've been healthy, or when they've been healthy, they've been good. There's a lot of concern there with Jimmy, Draymond, and Steph are all 35 or older. So you have just a lot of uncertainty with the collective age there. You got the Kuminga situation, which is going to linger, of what's his role, what's his trade value, are they going to flip him ahead of the deadline? You do have some size concerns with this group where they play a lot of below average size guards. So because of Steph and Draymond and Jimmy and Steve Kerr, I think they'll always be in the playoff mix, but how high their ceiling is, I think is still, they added Al Horford, who's 40 years old. Like, they are one of the oldest teams in the league, really battling with the Clippers. And I think they have a real shot to be a top 6 seed, but I think the Lakers, I overall trust their health and their youth a little bit more than the Warriors. J Note, thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate you. Ken, what do you ultimately think that Jake's role will be once the season starts? I think it's more of a battle between him and Vando for the seventh man role. They do have different roles offensively and defensively. I think he's going to be someone in the high teens to low 20s minutes wise. And whether that's the seventh man or eighth man, I think that's still going to be determined through camp and the preseason. But I think right now he's had to do a little bit more on the ball than you would like. I think he's more of similar to Rui, he's more of a finisher than a creator. That said, we have seen some of the creating skills he has. Like, I think he's a better ball handler and like more of a secondary ball handler than Rui is, and can pass a bit. And he had the one lob to Ayton that Ayton connected on. But I think overall you want him more as a shooter and more of even like a tertiary, more like a third ball handler than like a secondary ball handler. But I suspect he'll come off of the bench, and if it's, let's say, Rui starting, maybe he's the Rui backup where he's coming in and playing a similar role in terms of being a spot up guy, maybe a cutter. He's maybe handling the ball a little bit more in some of the bench lineups, but more of an off ball guy, more of a shooter, shot 41 or 2% on threes last year. And then defensively, I think should be fine against most bench units. But I think right now the real question is, how do they want to structure? I think it just depends what they do with the Rui versus Smart. And then I almost think there's two battles right now: Rui versus Smart for the fifth spot, and then Jake versus Vando for the seventh spot. And you can make a case in either direction. I think I'm definitely more on the Smart side for the starting. I was more on the Jake side, but Vando with his play is winning me over. So I think that one's really close. What does it matter, bruh? Thank you for the super chat. Vando was excellent. If you add a passable offensive Vando with Smart and insert wing, we got action. Got to move Rui, get DK off my team. I mean, to go back to the offseason, if you flipped Rui and DK for Andrew Wiggins, I think Andrew Wiggins checks that box of the hypothetical insert wing that you are referencing here. So yeah, I mean, I think ideally the player that they trade for or the starting player here is someone who, it's going to be like a healthy Vando and a healthy Smart are both high level defenders. So it's going to be hard to find a player who's like clearly better than them. Like I think there are, like I think a Herb Jones, one healthy is. I think Dylan Brooks is a different type of defender, but like can be similarly impactful. But I think the key is finding someone who can maybe defend at a similar level or maybe like a teensy bit worse, but similar, but is a much better offensive player than either one of these guys. And that's where I think peak Wiggins is maybe like a little bit below Vando and Smart, but he's so ahead of them both offensively that it makes up for that. And he's just way more of a two-way player and way more of a plug and play player, I think, in a playoff setting. So that's the type of player. Like ideally you get someone better than Wiggins, but among the realistic trade options that are out there, I think he's arguably for right now remains the best, but there's a lot of time until the Lakers likely make a move. So we'll see who shakes loose ahead of then. Matthew Wilson, I'm not seeing enough plays designed for Rui and Vando to get backdoor cuts to the basket. I think the issue right now is in part the spacing and them not having guys who can get, especially once Austin went out. Like Austin was really the only guy who consistently penetrated against the Suns going into this game. Gabe got downhill a bit. Laravia got downhill a little bit more in the third. Vando had a couple of possessions where he got downhill, but like for the most part, everything was side to side and not really north south. So I think they were missing, like they undoubtedly were missing their playmakers. And like that's why, again, I'm not really harping on the offensive end. I think the offensive end, they're going to be fine and they're going to figure that out. I'm harping on the defensive end because in theory, some of their better defenders were supposed to be playing more during this stretch, and it still looked really bad. And now you add in a Luka, you add in an Austin, you add in a LeBron who's maybe a little bit more conservative with his workload, either in availability, either in games or just minutes overall. And then maybe he's a little bit more conservative with how he's approaching his workload defensively. And this could get even worse, theoretically, right? Like, I don't think you're adding Luka, Austin, and LeBron and getting better defensively. You are adding Smart and getting better defensively, but is that going to fix this defense that has looked really, really bad? Like, I don't know if that's enough. So, we'll see. Mr. TD, Smart might be our fourth best playmaker. 100% he is. Smart has averaged 4 or 5 assists most years in his career as a starter or rotation guy. So Smart is definitely their fourth best playmaker. Best League says trade for Norman Powell plus Kessler plus Wiggins. Well, financially that is going to be tough, and I don't think asset wise they're there. They only have 1 first. Utah wants 2 for Kessler, to say nothing of additional. Fries, the Warriors starting 5 is going to abuse Austin. I think Austin's defended Steph pretty well. If you look at the matchup data throughout the years, like, Austin's problem is not his speed. That's actually Austin's strength defensively, is Austin is quick and he could defend a lot of the quicker perimeter players. It's the guys who are bigger or stronger than him, or if he switched onto a big or like a big forward, that's where Austin gets into trouble. But in terms of actually just moving his feet on the perimeter, Austin's had some pretty good defensive games against Steph and against some of the quicker guards in general. Mr. TD, Dillon Brooks might be a better option than Wiggins. I think you might be right. I've come around on Dillon Brooks, especially watching a little bit more film on him. I think he's toned it down offensively, and that's been my biggest concern with him. Is I just think he can sometimes be too much of a wild card on the offensive end, and just frankly is a player who at times has thought he's better than he is offensively, and that's led to these pull-up shots and these wild attempts that lower and really tank his field goal percentage or 3-point percentage. Whereas I think last year in Houston, he made some strides. Just in that game against the Lakers, I didn't really dislike any of the shots he took. So if he's purely a spot up guy, he's actually become a pretty good catch and shoot guy. If he's trying to post guys up or take guys off the dribble or take these fadeaways in the mid range, that's where my issues with Dillon Brooks stem from. And then you add that to a Marcus Smart, who's also a guy who can be like that. And all of a sudden you lose the plot offensively with 2 guys who can hijack the offense in a concerning way. But Brooks is a better shooter than Wiggins. He's a more physical defender than Wiggins. I think Wiggins is better against quicker guys, but maybe with Vando and Smart, you can get away with that. And you have Brooks, defending up. I don't think he could really defend 2s. He's more of a 3-4 defender, but he could defend at a really high level. Omaris, Jovan, any idea if they're practicing tomorrow? Not heard officially yet, but I believe they're going to be off. After a game day, you typically take the day off. You rarely practice that next day, especially in the preseason. So I think they're going to return to practice on Tuesday. Some of the Dylan comments are great. We have Dylan the Villain Brooks chiming in saying he would still take Wiggins over himself. That is something. Ken Carter, Jovan, one thing I will say about Wiggins is he moved his family to Miami and has dealt with off-court stuff. I'd rather move Rui for Nesmith personally. I'd rather have Nesmith too. I don't know how realistic that is. I think it probably costs you Rui and a first, to be honest. And I don't know if the Lakers want to pay that. And I don't even know if Nesmith is available for that. But I think that's probably the framework. Alex C, defense is effort and having a system. They have no effort today and players confused. So I agree. And I think this is twofold, where I think the effort has not been there. And I think the system is still working out the kinks, right? Like they're still figuring things out. And at the same time, a guy just getting beat on a simple back cut, like that isn't necessarily something like you can coach that and you can have film on that, but that is a basic thing that you should just know as an NBA player at this level, that just some of the breakdowns that they had were such simple errors that I guess you could argue that should be easy to clean up. But part of it, I also think, is like an athleticism thing where like Golden State, remember the Lakers, they played Golden State in March and both teams were playing pretty small at that time. Like Hayes, I'm pretty sure Hayes played a little bit less in that game, and LA just went small ball versus small ball. And Golden State was just quicker. They were just quicker and more athletic than the Lakers. And they got them into a track meet and they beat them in the track meet because the Lakers players are not as comfortable playing faster and they're not as athletic. And I think that's where JJ is really harping on the conditioning to be like, okay, maybe we can't become more like athletic or like quicker, but if we're better conditioned, we can keep up in some of these higher pace games, which I think is admirable. And I think that's a good goal to have. But again, like Steph Curry is just quicker than basically anybody the Lakers are going to try to put on him. Vando did a pretty good job. Smart has done a good job on him in previous years. I don't know where he's at now, but even a guy like Buddy Hield's really good without moving without the ball. Moses Moody beat a lot of guys on cuts or drives. Jimmy against some of the bigger guys in the front court was able to take. So it's like even Draymond took DeAndre Ayton off the dribble a couple times. It's just, I think at each position they're kind of, and it's also partly a matchup based thing. Golden State's really fast, but I do think position to position, the Lakers are like typically, especially for as good as Austin and Luka are, those two guys are almost always going to be matched up at an athleticism speed disadvantage. LeBron is still one of the top athletes in the league, so he's the exception here. Ayton, I think it really depends on who they're playing. And then Rui depends on, I mean, if Rui's playing a guard, he's going to be at a speed disadvantage, right? So yeah, I just think part of it's also the personnel. Dylan Brooks asks, how about Matisse Thybulle? I like Thybulle. I think he's more of a bench player than a starter. I know he's improved as a shooter, and maybe that technically allows him, but I think if we're being honest about his slotting, I think he's more in that like Vando, like he's better than Vando offensively or less of a non-threat, but in terms of just like where he is in the ideal pecking order, I think he's probably more of a bench player. But yeah, I think the other issue is Portland's actually trying to win. I don't think they're going to be successful. I don't think they're going to be a playing team, but his contract is also an expiring contract. So there's no incentive. If you're the Lakers and you're saying, here, take Maxi Kleba or take Gabe Vincent with similar expiring money, that's not going to be enough. And I don't think a Lakers second is going to be enough. Are they willing to put a swap or, a pick swap in that? They're not going to put the first, but the Lakers also just have limit. Like if they could maybe do Maxi in 2 seconds for Matisse Thybulle, okay, you could talk me into that as like a cheap upgrade that balances out the rotation a bit. I just don't see why Portland does that. And it's not, they're not just going to do that for Gabe or Maxi alone, right? And then the Lakers don't have, I've talked about this a lot, but they don't have a lot of like small to mid-tier assets. They have, it's either like a second round pick, which I think most teams are going to look at it and be like, the Lakers are probably going to be good. This is probably going to be a pick that's like 45 to 60 in most projections. Or it's a first round pick that the Lakers are just not going to give up for a player like Matisse Thybulle. He's not good enough for a first round pick. So then they have the swaps, which are kind of in the middle, but depending on the year, especially the more recent swaps, which are what the Lakers are probably going to want to give up, those are going to be less valuable because on paper, the Lakers, like the whole point of a swap is you're betting that team is going to be worse than you. But the Lakers project out actually really good in the short term now that Luka's locked up. So there aren't many teams that can say we project the Lakers to be worse than us. And it's not Portland. So yeah, I have a tough time seeing a Thybulle fit. Mr. TD said, Jovan said smart guard Steffel. That was years ago, not now. Mr. TD, Denny Avdia would be nice. Yeah, Avdia is going to, they don't have the assets for him. It's going to cost Austin. Connor Phillips is Andrew Nembhard on the table. I think he has a higher price than Nesmith, to be honest. So that's another one that probably, I don't think Rui in a first is getting you Nembhard. Angelo T. Yo-Yo Jovan. If Vando plays well to start the season, do you see his trade value increasing for any teams? Managed to trade him for Derrick Jones Jr. on 2K. One could dream. LOL. Potentially, I think he's got to stay healthy. Rob's talked about he wants to evaluate the team over a 20 to 25 game sample size. I think Vando would have to stay healthy probably closer to the trade deadline. Like if he stays healthy and plays 45 of the first 50 games, 43, 42 of the first 50 games, was largely healthy and is really impactful. I mean, the Lakers just might not want to trade him. He might be too important to what they're doing to trade, but I think there's a chance he can rehab his value. In the conversations, whenever I talk to NBA people about Vando, I think and I've said this before, so I'm not breaking any news or saying anything new here, but I think the general consensus is I think people outside of the Lakers are a little bit lower on how good he is defensively. Like I think everyone acknowledges he's good, but I think the Lakers and a lot of Laker fans are like, he's elite. He's like an all defense type guy. I don't think a lot of people around the league view him like that currently. And of course the injuries have taken its toll on him, but like a little bit of damaged goods from that perspective. But then there's also the offensive end where I think sometimes people like the trading camp, there's the buzz of, oh, Vando's shooting and this and that. And I think for a lot of people, they're just like, no, he's like a glaring, and he's a minus on offense, and that offsets any of the positive defensively, because in a playoff setting, you're going to put a center on him, you're going to put a point guard on him, and you're going to ignore him, and you're going to dare them to find a way to make him effective offensively. So I would assume there's like 2 preseason games has not changed the consensus opinion on Vando, but I think where there's some real upside here is even if the league-wide perception on him doesn't necessarily change, if he could just live up to his contract with the Lakers, like that alone is a win for LA, because thus far he has not. Like last year, he did not live up to that contract, similar to Gabe. They need those guys to live up to that contract or their respective contracts, because between Gabe, Vando, and Maxey, you have about $34 million in salary, which is a good chunk of your salary. And those 3 guys, unless they could stay healthy and really contribute, are not like projecting to live up to that right now. So that's a big, I think, swing factor in terms of like just how good the Lakers are. Matthew Wilson, Gabe seems like he spent the offseason working on scoring off the dribble and becoming a better facilitator. I don't think he is at his best. Miami Gabe being used as a corner specialist. I agree. The pushback here is the Lakers have 3 and potentially even 4 players who are clearly better ball handlers and passers than Gabe. So I think Gabe is just a function of like just kind of being a victim of circumstance here, of just not an ideal situation for him. Kind of similar to Rui in a way, where Rui has duplication with the Lakers' 2 best players from a defensive perspective, and that forces him to have to defend down probably in a way that he's just not really equipped to do. And I think he's gotten better at that, but it's just not a strength for Rui. So I think with Gabe, it's like, I agree with you. I think Gabe is clearly a guy who plays better when he touches the ball, plays better when he's handling it. He's running pick and roll. He's more involved in the offense. He's a very rhythm-based player. The issue is, do you want to take the ball out of Luka Doncic's hands to try to get Gabe going? Do you want to take the ball out of Austin's hands? Do you want to take the ball out of LeBron's hands? Do you want to take the ball out of Marcus Smart's hands, who Marcus Smart, like, he's going to want to be involved offensively. He has always been involved offensively wherever he's been. And he's historically been a better playmaker than Gabe. He's run actual point guard like more than Gabe has throughout his NBA career. So like I think ideally Smart is more of a secondary guy, but you just have there's a lot of mouths to feed here in terms of the ball handling and playmaking. And I think it's hard to be the fifth ball handler and fifth playmaker in your rotation. There's just a limit to how much you're going to be involved. And that's ultimately where I see Gabe as like, if I were Gabe, I actually would have been just working on being more of a corner specialist and like being more consistent with that stuff, because he's not going to get to have the ball a lot, I think, as constructed. Princess 808, yo, who do you think will replace LeBron's position if the Lakers do not give him a contract next season? Could be Rui. Although, I mean, it really depends on how you construct the starting group. It's tough to say without knowing like what the Lakers are going to do in free agency and what's going to happen with Austin. And like there's a lot of questions here with what next year's roster looks like. So I don't know. I don't think there's like a 1-for-1 LeBron replacement, but yeah, I don't have a great, like it could be Rui, but I mean, they're not, there's some similarities in their general game and general strengths, but I mean, LeBron is at an entirely different level than Rui in many, many facets. Puppy Chow asking about Malik Beasley. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So he's available. It's just been I think people have been nervous to take that whole situation on. Omaris, what's your prediction for the first 25 games of the season? I think someone had asked me 15, and I think I went 10-5, 11-4, 10-5. So if we pull up, let's just pull it up. Gonna go about 5-ish more minutes, but you know what that means. Let's go. So Golden State, Minnesota. I've said before, so I think they're going to split these two. I'm not quite sure which one they're going to lose. I do think they split to start, beat Sacramento, beat Portland 3-1. I think they lose at Minnesota 3-2, beat Memphis, beat Miami, beat Portland. That's 6-2. Beat San Antonio 7-2. I'll say 11-4 through the first 15, and then if we expand that out here, 3, 6, 9, 12, or 10 is through Utah. They play Utah 3 times through the first 25 games. I mean, that should be 3 wins. Then home Dallas. I'll say I'm going to go pretty optimistic here. I'm going to say 18-7 to start, which is pretty aggressive, but that does include a pretty backloaded schedule. So I will say 18-7 through the first 25, but let me know what you guys think. I see KJ says 17-8. Michael says 5 more minutes, doing the emoji. Mr. TD, is LeBron ready to go? I mean, he hasn't practiced or non-contact portions with the glute nerve injury. Excuse me. I don't know. I just read energy in the chat. So I think he'll be ready to go by opening night, but I don't know when. Oh, Oida Boy asking me a tough one here, but this is a super chat and you are a member, so I do have to answer it. Who's the worst player you would swap Braun for? Oof. Well, okay. There's a lot of context here, because are we talking about for this season or for the future? Because I think the bar for the future, like if you could get basically a top 30 player and swap Braun in, like you do, I think take a step back for now, but you are potentially locking in a really nice piece for the long run. But I would say if we're just talking about like this season and the goal is still the context of like winning a championship, let me see. Let me pull up some NBA player rankings. So NBA rank, I think they had LeBron at 8, right? So Jokic, Shea, Luka, Giannis. Of course, any of these guys, I'd rather have them than LeBron. Wemby, Ant. They have Steph 7, LeBron 8. I know that was controversial for a lot of people. KD 9, Brunson 10. I'm not going to read through everybody. I guess like an NBA rank, I guess they have Donovan Mitchell at 15. That's probably like the lowest I would go for this year. I think now once we get into like the Booker, Banchero, Butler, Brown, Kawhi, I think there's a lot of questions with those guys. Banchero is an interesting one where I would have to consider that at 17. But again, this is tough to answer without knowing. Like if we're talking like longer, taking on their long-term contract, and like a guy like Chet at 24, it's like I'd love to have Chet's long-term contract with Luka, or going down the list like a Jaren Jackson Jr. or I know his contract situation isn't settled, but like there's guys down the list that I would entertain like longer term just because LeBron is an expiring. But yeah. Best league, Jovan, I would swap LeBron for Banchero. Yeah, I think Banchero is probably maybe the lowest. Like, I don't even agree with that ranking. I think I'd rather have Banchero than Booker. I think I saw Omaris said Jimmy would be a perfect fit. And Jimmy and Luka would be a funny fit together. Jaylen Brown, I do like Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is in the mix. Like, yeah, that's fair. Brian asked, would you trade LeBron for KD? That's really close. Like, so I think you could make a case KD is a more natural fit with Luka because of his off ball. Like he's used to playing off the ball and coming off pin downs and more of a catch and shoot spot up guy. Definitely a better shooter than LeBron overall. I think an engaged LeBron is still better defensively. Obviously, the ball handling and playmaking goes to LeBron, and the rebounding. That's close. Like I guess for this specific team, you could argue that, but I do think the defensive piece is important because I think LeBron has to play a big role in this team defensively, and I think KD's quietly slipped a bit. Like LeBron has slipped a bit too, but we see when he ramps it up, he can really get to a certain level. Even in the playoffs, I thought he had some really good stretches, but yeah, that's a tough one. But there's also the KD, let's just say off-court stuff that you have to deal with. Matthew Wilson would like to see a 3-2 zone defense being tried with this team. Yeah, I'd like to mix it up. I like them to have more looks. And I know I'm going to pull this one up that I saw when I was someone was asking why I was being so harsh. I don't know where that went. Someone was asking why I was being so harsh on here. Light him up. Why is Jovan being so harsh on a preseason game like it's a regular season game or a playoff game? Well, I'm definitely not treating this like a playoff game. My point, I just think the Lakers have been very incoherent and incompetent defensively, and I just think it's a big concern for me. That's it. I'm not trying to overreact to the 2 preseason games. I just think there's been just I feel like if we're really rating like each facet of defense outside of rim protection and maybe some of the ball pressure, particularly with a guy like Vando in like the front court. They rate out really poorly in communication, in urgency, in execution of scheme, in screen navigation, in off-ball tracking, off-ball awareness. Like I just think like they pretty much rate out in like as like a C- at best in all those, but really probably more in like the D to F range. And I don't want to overreact to 2 preseason games, but that's all we have to go off of right now. And I think some of this stuff is like basic stuff that should not be happening for a team that has championship aspirations, but we'll see. And to be honest, I'm more so focusing, like, I'll say this. I actually felt a little bit better after the Phoenix game in some regards. Or I felt better about the first half after I rewatched, because I saw there were 2 stretches where they went Nick Smith, Bronny, and Dalton, and they got lit up. And it was like, okay, like these guys are not playing. Nick Smith is a 2-way. Bronny and Dalton, I think, are going to be in the bottom 2 or 3 or bottom 4 in the rotation. I'm not going to judge this team's defensive ability based on those 3 guys. But there were some real concerning stretches with Laravia getting beat off the ball, Rui getting beat off the ball, Vando gambling and getting out of position and making mistakes, DeAndre Ayton not getting back in transition or not playing up to touch in the pick and roll. Gabe didn't play in the first one. Austin got beat off the dribble a couple times. So it's like, I'm not talking about, I'm not saying because Bronny has some concerns, I'm like concerned with the Lakers defense. No, I'm talking about the rotation guys. I'm talking about the top 8 or 9 guys all having some real concerns with basic transition defense, basic off-ball defense, basic screening coverages, and them really struggling in those regards. Like, so you could say I'm being harsh, but I don't know. I think that's like a real thing. Oots of the Wee, healthy Braun in the playoffs, everyone outside the top 5. Yeah, that's, I mean, I think, to be honest, like the Mitchell thing would be, I think Mitchell's really good in the playoffs, though he comes with some real defensive concerns, and Mitchell with Luka, I guess, isn't a great fit. So that's, yeah, I think Braun for me is it would be a high bar to give up on Braun. Line him up says, everyone, including Jovan, relaxed. They've had 3 practices together and aren't playing their true rotations. I agree on the last part, but I also push back a little bit on the practices thing, where most of this group has been together for most of September. And actually the 2 guys that weren't there were LeBron and Luka, and those guys have not played. So I think, again, if JJ wants to bring up that Phoenix had pre-training camp practices together or spent time in the gym together, like the Lakers have had the same thing. Maybe not with the full squad, but pretty close to it. So I don't know. We'll see. Like maybe I'm too in the moment right now, but I have been really disappointed with the defense so far, but there's certainly room for improvement. Matthew Wilson, concerned about Kleba and Adu availability. Not particularly, because honestly, I think the Lakers can get by without either of them, but it would be nice to at least see them in the preseason, but they're supposed to be back. J Note says, like the video. Yes, let's get those likes up. Let's get those subs up. I'm going to wrap here before I get sucked into a bunch of other topics, but appreciate you guys for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back tomorrow with a new episode of Buha's Block. Going to have Kobe Price on the show, and we're going to break down a lot of what I discussed today, and maybe Kobe will have a different perspective on the defense or the rotation or some of the concerns, but excited to have that conversation with him, and excited to rewatch this game and come with some new perspective or observations. But appreciate you all. Shout out to the late night gang. I'll be going either episodes or lives all throughout the week, most likely after the practices. I'm guessing they're going to practice Tuesday to Friday, at least, if not Tuesday to Saturday. So I will be creating content all week. This is the new normal. YouTube every day, podcast every day. Love it. Love you guys, and talk to you all very soon.